Hello, folks. Welcome back to another edition of SHU Outdoors. Today, we're going to discuss a taboo topic, a controversial topic, capital punishment here in the United States. I did 25 years in prison here in the United States. And I think I have some unique insights, and over time, my opinions and ideas on the subject has evolved and changed. And definitely hit me up in the comments and let me know what you think about it and how I presented the subject matter. Take one. Dark storms rolling in, politicians locking in again, talking heads spin their screen, live bomb floating drop down, mostly tuned in. This is attached, but rises up again. Light up, shining down on me. Feel so alive when it is you and me. So, from my perspective, the only thing that capital punishment should ever be carried out on another human is for the taking of human life. I'm not saying there's not other horrible crimes that individuals commit they shouldn't have to pay a heavy price for. But I think when you get into taking human life, it's a serious business operation, and it should never be indulged in or partaken lightheartedly. You got two fundamental types of murderers in prison. And after having served 25 years in prison, I've met both kind. You got the kind of person in prison who did commit homicide, oftentimes when they were younger, not necessarily a juvenile, but younger, 18, 19, 20, 21, that time frame in an individual's life. And they're obviously an adult, but maybe they're not the type of adult they would be at 30 or 35 years old. And there was no robbery or no sexual deviance involved in the crime. It was a type of situation where one thing led to another, and the individual ended up having their life taken. Now, obviously, that's a very serious crime, probably right at the list of the most serious crimes. And in my opinion, an individual like that, where, yeah, they did something pretty horrible and they definitely got to pay a high price for it. But in my experience, in my opinion, individuals like that, they committed the act, they know what they did, and they would never do it again. So, 25 years in prison, 25 years to life, that's a pretty hefty punishment. That's definitely not a lightweight punishment. And in a situation where one thing led to another, there was really no premeditated element involved, but a human life was taken. in my opinion, 25 years to life could quite possibly be a suitable punishment for that. And I know other individuals may have a different opinion, but that's kind of the way I see it. And depending on the elements, 15, 20, 25 to life. Was it a fist fight where a knife became involved and a person lost their life? Was it a fight that occurred at a party? Or, I guess all those elements would come into play when you were looking at a situation like that. And then you got the other type of killer in prison. Individuals, in my opinion, that have basically lost their right to be called a human being. Individuals that are so depraved and have no remorse for the horrible, evil acts they've committed. They basically have lost their right to be considered a human being. And I know a lot of people will take issue with me by saying that, but I look at it like this. When you done abducted 2 or 3 or 4 or more children or women or just individuals, old people, or just a high-risk group, and when you've abducted these type of individuals, kidnapped them, committed torture and other horrible acts on them, and then unalived them, I think you may very well have forfeited your right to call yourself a human being. I know a lot of people may take issue with me for saying something like that, but it's kind of the way I see it. I'm not anti-death penalty. I think the death penalty should be preserved for true human monsters, not for someone who did something spontaneous and it was an act of poor judgment, and there's definitely a high price to be paid for what the individual did. But in my opinion, I've come across individuals in prison that were there for committing horrible acts, i.e. hitmen, i.e. individuals that have abducted individuals, subjected them to all kind of pain and suffering and torture, and then unalived them. I happen to think that the death penalty is appropriate for those type of individuals. Not necessarily that it will bring the person back that has been did wrong by this person. I just think some individuals are not fit to breathe the air that decent folks has got to breathe. I.e., if you're one of these individuals that abducted a whole bunch of children and tortured them and unalived them, you definitely, right at the top of the list for individuals, you should definitely be given the ultimate punishment, capital punishment. But, some of the problems I have with capital punishment is this. No one could ever convince me that hundreds of innocent people have been put to death here in the United States, especially in rural southern states, but not just exclusively those states, because they were poor, uneducated, and didn't have an attorney that was up for the task of defending an individual who was being accused of a capital crime, where the prosecutor was seeking the ultimate punishment. There's no way in this world that the prosecutor, the state, should seek execution for an individual, and this prosecutor went to one of the best law schools and has the resources at the state at their fingertips, the police to investigate, a budget for all kind of expert witnesses, coercion tactics. Hey, if you testify on this guy, we could give you a reduced sentence. Have all those resources at their disposal. And a state court or a federal court, but it's specifically state courts in the Deep South, the judge will allow an attorney to represent this defendant who is fresh out of law school and really doesn't understand the depth of litigation that's going to be required to have a fighting chance to clear this individual's name. I'm a huge proponent of fair trials. I have, even as an ex-prisoner, I deserve to go to prison for what I did. That doesn't mean that I enjoyed being in prison or I ever want to go back to prison. No, that's not the case at all. But I'm a reasonable person, and when you break the law, especially major laws, well, there's a price to be paid. So there's no way that an individual facing the ultimate punishment should have such a lopsided trial. Now, it's one thing if you're a relatively new lawyer and you're representing people that or have a drug possession or a burglary or car theft or something like those. Those are serious crimes too, but the stakes ain't as high. Well, you're talking about taking someone's life because they get sentenced to be executed by the state. That individual is entitled to the best representation available. And there's really good lawyers in every state, in every district, that could take that case on and at least make sure that all the facts are uncovered. Because, as human beings, and we're all fell subject to it, we think we got all the facts and we make a decision, an opinion or come to an opinion on any given topic. A year later, we get new information and we're like, well, we were wrong about that. When you're talking about taking other human beings' lives, it's not something you want to be wrong about. You want to make sure you get it right the first time. And that's another reason why these appeals drag on for years and years and years and years, because the guy was given an inadequate trial in the beginning. It's important that if someone's accused of something horrible like this, make sure you got the right guy. Now, if the guy has adequate representation and that lawyer, that attorney has adequate resources to make sure that all the facts are uncovered and presented to the jury, and the jury hears all those facts, and the defense attorney has the opportunity and the means, and if the taxpayers have to foot the bill, so be it. The taxpayers, by way of their elected representatives, are attempting to sentence this individual to the ultimate punishment. So what? You got to pay it. You got to pay that bill. You're going to end up paying it in the long run anyway, with him sitting in death row for 30 years and exhausting 20 appeals. Why not get it right the first time and make sure the guy is adequately represented and all the facts come out so the jury can make an informed decision? And if after the jury hears all the facts, i.e. this guy planted some kind of explosive device and 20 or 30 people were injured, maimed, or unalived, or this individual apprehended, kidnapped a number of young people or any number of different people, subjected them to horrible treatment, torture, and then unalived them because of some kind of horrible sexual deviancy that they were into. And the jury hears all that evidence and comes back and says, yeah, this guy's guilty. He did this. Based on everything we've heard, we've all unanimously agreed that this individual did this. I'm not opposed to capital punishment under those specific narrow terms. All right? But once you subject someone to that and you realize later on that you had a horrible first year attorney and all kind of evidence slipped by that wasn't entered into the court record and the jury never had an opportunity to hear it, and then you done took this individual's life to make him pay for what he's did, and it comes out later on that maybe he wasn't the guy who did it, that's a real bad look for the state. It's a bad look for society and the citizens of any given society that co-signs that. But if that individual is found guilty and all the facts come in and he has a good lawyer right from the beginning, better than good, excellent, because we're not talking about sending somebody to prison for 10 years. We're talking about taking a human being's life for some horrible act they've committed. And if all those facts are come out and the jury says, yeah, this individual did this, well, then I'm not opposed to the death penalty. I'm really not. I'm not gung-ho about the death penalty either, don't get me wrong. But I think certain individuals have earned their way on the death row and probably aren't fit to breathe the air that decent folks breathe. All right? Now, I've met several people in prison that had no redeeming qualities, and they were there for horrible acts committed on their fellow human beings. So that's kind of my take on it. In prison, another point I want to make before I move on from that subject, and if the jury finds the individual guilty, then the jury should have to come back with a unanimous decision, one way or another. Does this individual get life without parole, or does he have to pay the ultimate price? The jury should have the testicular fortitude to say we find the guy guilty based on all the evidence and we recommend X, Y. No Z. X or Y. You're guilty, you're getting life without parole, or you're going to have to take that final walk. They shouldn't be able to kick it back to one judge, just one judge who makes that call. The jury should have to make the call. This is a big deal. And you should make sure the guy gets a fair trial right from the very beginning. And not just a fair trial, excellent, vigorous representation. Because in that way, the system, the nation, and the taxpayers and the voters who vote these judges and these governors into office can rest easy at night. Prison is a horrible place. But if you're doing a long prison sentence, there's still ways to eke out a little bit of enjoyment, i.e. you can watch a television program or a football, basketball game, baseball game, whatever you're into. You can go down to recreation and maybe play the guitar or smoke a contraband cigarette occasionally or drink a little bit of homemade wine or hooch or, get a visit, make a phone call. And it's a horrible existence, but it still is an existence. And there may be a little bit of light if you got 25 years to life, which is a pretty hardcore sentence. But there may be a little bit of light behind that. I think some people, based on their acts, what they have been found guilty of, in a fair, vigorous trial, have forfeited their right to call themselves a human being, because everything they've did in their life indicates that they're less than a human being. Now, I'm not saying that we should resort to anything that they did. Give them a fair trial. If they're found guilty, make sure they got their food, treat them like a human being. And you don't have to, if you give them a fair, vigorous trial up front, you won't have to have 20 or 30 years of appeals. Because all the facts come in, there's really nothing else to be reviewed. They were given a fair trial. They weren't beat for a confession. They didn't sign a confession under distress. They had a good attorney right from day one and represented them vigorously. And when all the facts came out, yeah, the guy did it. It's not that I'm anti necessarily most things. I'm just I'm pro being fair. especially if you're talking about taking another individual's life. It's a pretty big deal. And I'd appreciate it if you let me know what you think about, the subject matter, and hit me up in the comments with your opinions. And, and I know a lot of people have, pretty hardcore opinions on this. And I'm an ex-con, man, so I'm not gun-ho death penalty at all. But I have met individuals in prison that I just didn't feel had any redeeming qualities. And I'm just one person, one opinion. And hit me up in the comments with your opinion. Let me know what you think, man. So next time, stay up. Peace.